Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman here. Sad to say the good days of cyber insurance are gone. There are very important changes occurring right now in the cyber insurance marketplace that you're going to have to plan for in advance because if you don't, your business could just effectively be left without very important coverages for potentially months or years at this point. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. Now, first, we're going to be seeing stricter control requirements. We're already seeing this out there. Cyber insurance companies are now saying, hey, thou shalt have X, Y, or Z. Otherwise, we're going to severely sublimit that coverage, or we're not even going to offer a quote to you without these particular requirements. Now, when I say controls, what does that mean? Well, if you're an MSP watching this, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're an IT guy, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're a business owner in some other field, a control could mean anything from EDR to MFA to backups to antivirus, that type of thing. So in the description below, I'll link to the CIS Top 18. I would encourage really every business owner, just breeze through that real quick. It provides a very good overview that's easily approachable and digestible for someone without a cybersecurity background to get a good handle on generally what these controls typically mean. Now, what does your exact firm need? Well, I don't know, we'd have to talk, but it's going to depend upon your specific insurance company, the size of your business, the industry of your business, and what controls you already have in place. So moral of the story here is talk to your IT professional who's in-house or talk to your MSP and go, hey, I want you to put together a wish list with a cost and a plan of implementation. So that way you can sit down and you can go, okay, what's the biggest bang for the buck here we have as a business? Understanding that we have budgetary restraints and we can't spend billions of dollars on cybersecurity. That's really going to go a long way to put you ahead of the game. Next, what if you haven't heard anything yet, right? Maybe you're sitting there, and I've heard this before, they're saying, hey, my insurance company hasn't demanded anything yet. Well, first off, we have insurance companies just cutting off either entire industries that are seeking coverage, or they're saying, hey, anybody below a certain revenue threshold in these industries, we're not even going to be offering a renewal moving forward. Now, often you won't even know about this until maybe 60 or 90 days before that policy is due to renew. Now, all of a sudden, you have to go out to the market and you're going to be subject to these particular requirements. So if it's not this year, it's definitely going to be next year. And hey, maybe you already have these things in your policy, but your insurance guy just didn't tell you yet. Now, with that, you need to start planning ahead because, as I said before, it could be, potentially 2 weeks before your renewal or a week before your renewal. It's getting harder and harder to get these cyber insurance quotes pushed out because there's just so much action in the market and everyone's trying to shop it because the prices are going up and underwriters are just overloaded, quite frankly. So you don't want to be in a position where suddenly there's some major change you have to make within the next 7 days, or you're just not going to get cyber insurance, or you're going to be left with this huge gaping hole of coverage that's going to keep everybody up at night and could potentially bankrupt your business, right? You don't want to be in that position. So things like hardware or software acquisition, obviously hardware, that makes sense. There's a supply chain shortage, there's a chip shortage. You got to get the right type of software. It has to be implemented. Even for something like software, there's multiple options of software. So you're going to have to pick the best software for your particular business, for your particular needs. And that's not just something you can do overnight, right? So you want to be able to plan for this ahead of time. Don't be left in the lurch. Now, let's talk about kind of the broad changes we're seeing here. And then after this slide, we're going to be getting into very, very specific changes. The first change we're seeing is caps on widespread events. And this makes sense because there's just so much risk in the cyber insurance market that insurance companies just, maybe they don't even know that risk exists. Well, with that, they're saying, hey, if there's going to be this big widespread event, they're putting specific restrictions on how much coverage they're going to offer, what the overall limits of coverage could be, what some of those sublimits could be. It's just going to depend on the insurer. That's going to have a material impact on how much you're willing to spend on your own cybersecurity, because that fundamentally just changes the risk calculus within your own business. Next, coinsurance requirements for ransomware. More and more common. Ransomware is really just the scourge of the earth here. And so with that, not only you're going to have your deductible, but effectively you could have some percentage of that ransomware cost brought back upon you. That, once again, has a material impact on how much you're willing to spend on cybersecurity. And then, of course, we're seeing just lower limits and sublimits across the board. So things like cybercrime, social engineering, ransomware, these are things you need to plan for in advance. This is why I said earlier, hey, talk to your IT guy, talk to your MSP, get their wish list, and start looking at some type of plan of implementation for the biggest bang for the buck. All right, specific exclusions, critical vulnerability exclusion. And as I pop these up, you feel free to just pause the video and you could read through it yourself. Effectively, what we're seeing here is there's something called the Common Vulnerability and Exposure Database. Okay, that's operated by NIST. What this particular policy is saying, and your policy could be different, is hey, if it's assigned a vulnerability score of 8 or greater, and a manufacturer or developer issued a patch to remedy such vulnerability, and you failed to apply or deploy the issued patch within 14 calendar days of issuance. So, hey, you've got 2 weeks, according to this particular clause, where if there's a vulnerability of a score greater than 8, you have to deploy that patch. Once again, for my IT brethren out there, you know it's not as simple, but for my fellow business owners, these things have to be tested, okay? So this is really, I think, going to be, one, very common, but two, I think this is also going to push a lot of businesses likely towards hiring an MSP because that's just hard to do. What happens if you miss that? Do you have staff internally who are keeping up with these vulnerabilities and keeping up with these patches? And two, as a business owner, how do you actually check on that, right? Make sure you're thinking about this. Next, and this is really going to be a killer, old hardware and software exclusions. So what you're going to see here is, hey, if there's some vulnerability that arises out of some legacy hardware or software system, so that's typically legacy hardware or software, that's something that's no longer supported, it's not being updated, there's no patches issued. If some event occurs through those systems, your insurance company could effectively deny coverage on you. Now, that's a problem for a whole number of reasons. Supply chain shortages, chip shortages, trying to get that hardware is taking longer and longer. But also, as I alluded to before, just the implementation of all this stuff and shopping for the right things. So please take a look with your IT professional and go, hey, do we have anything that's just out of date? Or more importantly, hopefully more importantly, is there anything which is soon to no longer be supported? And if so, one, you're going to have a cyber insurance issue, but two, just best practices. You don't want stuff out there that's not actually supported anymore, because just because new vulnerabilities pop up with that legacy hardware or software, the developer there or the manufacturer, they're not fixing that stuff, right? They've moved on to something new. So you don't want to be caught in this crazy loophole here. This could even be something as simple as, hey, the timekeeping software for your law firm, potentially. Those things are ancient and nobody ever updates that stuff. Well, if that is the nexus for you to have some type of event, now suddenly you're paying for all of those data breach costs or ransomware costs or whatever completely out of your firm's checking account. Not a good place to be. Next, I call this spying / monitoring of remote workers. So a lot of businesses now, I'm getting a lot of reports from MSP. They're saying, hey, I've got clients, they want to implement this specific software to keep tabs on their remote workers. Well, it's not that simple. And this is where I would highly encourage you as a business owner to seek legal counsel before you start doing this. Now, I really nerd out on cyber insurance, cybersecurity law, E&O insurance, liability law. Employment practices law just puts me to sleep, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert here. But there is something called the ECPA. That's the Electronic Communications Privacy Act. That's at the federal level. And there's also going to be various state laws that deal with this. So please, this could be probably an hour-long video just on this one topic if I delved into it. So please make sure, if you were looking at screen capture software or camera software or whatever else you're going to do, reach out to legal counsel before you implement that, because it really is going to just depend on your particular circumstance, what you're doing, the jurisdictions that you operate in. If you have remote workers, that complicates things, plus eCPA. So what you're going to see right here is this exclusion that arises out of any actual or alleged monitoring, tracking, profiling without the individual's authorization, including but not limited to web tracking, session recording, digital fingerprinting, behavioral monitoring, eavesdropping, wiretapping, audio or video recording, and use of any data resulting from such activities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, it's not as simple as, well, hey, they're my employee. It's a work issued device, so I can do whatever I want. It's not that simple, unfortunately. Please seek legal counsel or some claim that arises from this. You just may not have coverage. And I will say, juries don't look favorably upon an employer when an employee is trying to sue them, okay? Neither does the federal government, actually, right? It's the whole David versus Goliath thing in many cases. You don't want to be put in this position. All right, next, and this is really going to be a painful one. If you have this, please be exceedingly careful or find a different cyber insurance provider. What we're looking at here is 0-day exclusions. Now, what's a 0-day? That is a vulnerability that exists that really nobody knows about until the attack is launched. Now, from an insurance perspective, or I should say from the cyber insurance company's perspective, this makes sense because they can't actuarially define what the risk is of a 0-day or some specific type of vulnerability if they don't even know it exists yet. But as a business, probably not a position you want to be in. What this effectively means is, hey, if you get hit with a 0-day attack, your insurance company could just outright deny coverage on you for that attack. Not a good place to be. Please be very, very careful here. What this also means is, hey, maybe you can't get out of this particular policy, or this is the only policy available to you and has this exclusion. Well, now you have to start thinking about, well, if we get hit with a 0-day attack, what controls can we put in place to effectively mitigate or potentially mitigate the damage that could be associated with that? Once again, that's going to have a material impact on how much you're willing to spend on cybersecurity as a business owner, as well as the fact that you're going to have to plan for this well in advance. You don't want to get this exclusion on your policy and then all of a sudden freak out and say, oh my God, I didn't know this was here, or oh my God, this is my only option. Now I've got this big gaping hole here. What are we going to do? All this stuff takes time and money, and I want you to be prepared well in advance. And then all of this is kind of balanced by the fact that cyber insurance is increasingly becoming required, and I'm dealing with this all the time now. So really the big ones we're seeing is in the wealth management side, where Schwab and Fidelity are now requiring specific types of E&O and cyber insurance. But rest assured, I've been talking to various other industries and various underwriters in other industries, and they're saying, hey, all the other industries are watching this very closely because they effectively want to do the same thing. They're looking at that risk transference mechanism that is cyber insurance. So if they can get out of paying big claims, they're going to try and do it. They want to push cyber insurance on the little guys. So even if you're a small business, hey, you might get hit with this particular type of requirement, right? Where all of a sudden you have to have cyber insurance if you don't already have it. There's going to be specific types of cyber insurance you're going to have, right? Specific coverages there. So please be aware of that. Next, we're seeing a lot in contractual obligations as well. So we're seeing clients contractually demanding that their service providers actually have cyber insurance. Now, there's various justifications or things I would push back on in this particular regard, but it just kind of is what it is. All right. So you don't want to be caught uncompetitive. You don't want to go up for some big contract, especially in today's economic environment, and then suddenly see, oh, hey, we're going to need cyber insurance for this. You try to go get cyber insurance real quick. Now there's all of these additional requirements that are going to be put in place. You're not going to have time to really read through that contract. You're not going to have time to go through the nuances of that contract. That could potentially be very bad for you. All right, moving forward, kind of wrapping this all up here. What is your firm going to require to kind of hop back on it? I don't know. We would have to talk personally. It's going to depend upon the size of your business, what controls you already have in place, the revenue of your business, the industry that you're in, et cetera, et cetera. Next, make sure you're planning for these potential changes and budget for those accordingly. Some of this is just frankly going to be last minute and there's nothing any of us can do about it. So as we say in the military, semper gumby, always flexible, but do what you can to try and avoid all of these last minute rushes to begin with, because that is where mistakes are going to be made, both in the policies and the hardware and the software and the controls that could be implemented. Work with your IT or your MSP, get that wish list, start rank ordering those additional controls, find the biggest bang for the buck. Refer to the top 18 controls from CIS. Like I said before, I'm going to put that in the description down below. And threats are going to change, and so will requirements. In the past, it was, hey, get a cyber insurance policy, ready, fire, aim. Moving forward, not that simple, unfortunately. All right, with that, if you found this useful and learned something today, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Right above me is another video you will find useful. And if you click over there on my beautiful face, you can subscribe to my channel. Stay safe.